Hey everyone, I'm Drac, and I want to apologize for the lack of videos lately. I haven't uploaded in a little while, but the reason why I wasn't uploading was I was in Ohio at the US Nationals, which I think is a pretty good reason to not upload a video. However, did not get to play in US Nationals. I was not in the main event. I couldn't get there for day one. And so, since I couldn't get there for day one, I didn't really, there was no real way to play in it. I did go, though, and check it out and have some fun. I played in the side events. I did pretty well in the side events, so I was pretty happy with how they came out. I played Darkrai Garbodor, which is a video I covered a little bit. And so that's the deck I played. I did pretty good. There was a lot of Trevenants there in the side events, and so, that made it a little bit easier. But while I was in Ohio and during U.S. Nationals, a wild rotation appeared. And so we have the rotation information now. They have announced it. And the rotation for the standard format for the 2016 and 2017 season is Primal, Clash, and On. And so now that we know that, we can begin to prepare for the future, which is very cool. The sets that we lost, the sets that are being rotated out of standard, are the base XY set, the Flash Fire set, the Furious Fist set, and Phantom Forces set. Those are the four sets that we are losing. And so today I wanted to take this chance to kind of review what this means for our current meta, the decks that people are currently playing. What does this rotation mean for those decks? What will it likely mean for in the future? I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about that. I know you guys have been asking for gameplay. That's coming very, very soon. However, I've only had the channel for a little while, maybe like 3 weeks, and there's just been a lot to talk about. I mean, U.S. Nationals was coming up. All the foreign nationals were happening. The rotation now is announced. There's just been a lot of stuff to talk about, and so I really haven't been able to upload any of the gameplay yet. And so that's coming soon, though, I promise. But first, I wanted to cover the rotation, and so let's get into the decks and talk about how this rotation affects the decks that we're used to seeing right now in our current meta. And so first, we're going to cover some decks that just get demolished by this rotation. They're gone. They no longer exist in the standard format. Okay, and that's the first few decks we're going to cover. And the first one is Hallelujah Nightmarch. It is gone. All right, it is completely dead. There is not going to be a single Pokemon with the Nightmarch attack in the standard formation. Okay, it is done. Nightmarch is gone. All right, there's no arguing it. There is no saving it. It is completely done. And so I know a lot of people are happy about that. I'm fairly happy about it. Not so much because I didn't like Nightmarch. A lot of people think that Nightmarch was one of those decks where it's like, it's so easy to play. I hate it. It wins so easily. I really don't agree with that. I think that Nightmarch was actually a deck that did require a good bit of strategy and a good bit of thinking. And so I'm not happy because it's gone because of that. I'm happy it's gone because it was such a force to be reckoned with in the meta. It held down a lot of cards that could have been good, and it really had a stranglehold on the standard format for this last season, and still does. I mean, as I'm recording this, Worlds has not happened yet, and so Nightmarch is just gonna. It looks like it's gonna be the winner of Worlds too. I mean, it's been a very, very good deck, and so I'm more happy to see it rotate, to see new decks blossom. Not so much because I think Nightmarch was unfair or I hated the deck or anything like that. More just because I'm ready to see the standard format be a little, have a few more things in it than just Nightmarch and the counter decks. And so another deck that lost literally everything, is completely dead, is Mega Manectric. Literally both Manectric EX and Mega Manectric EX are rotating, so that deck is completely dead. There's no way to save it. It is gone out of the standard format now. Another deck that most likely is pretty freaking dead. I mean, you could make a case that you might still see it around, but I don't really think so. And that is Trevenant Break. Trevenant Break loses the Trevenant that has the item lock ability, and so that Trevenant is rotating, which to me absolutely spells death to the deck. Yes, Trevenant Break is still technically in the format. Yes, there's still a Trevenant in which you can Break Evolve, but that Trevenant does not have any sort of item lock. It only has the ability which makes their basic Pokemon attacks cost 1 more. And it's not nearly as good as item lock. I don't think we'll really be seeing Trevenant Break at all that much anymore. And then one of the reasons is because it lost more than just the item lock from the Trevenant. It lost Dimension Valley. Dimension Valley rotated here. And so all of its attacks to be fully paid for now. You can't just, reduce the costs by 1 with Dimension Valley anymore. That rotates. It lost Mystery Energy, which isn't that big of a hit, but it makes a difference when you're talking about a deck that lost its item block, which was the reason why it was good. It lost Dimension Valley, and it loses Mystery Energy. I just don't think you're going to see Trevenant Break anymore. The deck is basically dead. I would be very surprised to see it continue to do absolutely anything. Any deck based on Seismitoad is basically dead now too. Seismitoad EX is rotating. Seismitoad has been a very, very, very good card for a very, very good, very, very long time. And so it's time. It's time for it to rotate, Any deck that was based on Seismitoad is going to not be very good anymore. Seismitoad Hammers, obviously, is not going to be good anymore because really the only attacker it ran was Seismitoad. Seismitoad Crobat will definitely not be good anymore because both Seismitoad and Crobat are rotating, so both of those are rotating. However, I do want to point out that Zubat and Golbat, in fact, are not rotating because they were reprinted in Generations, but Crobat was not reprinted, and so Crobat is rotating. So it's kind of weird that Zubat and Golbat stay around, but not Crobat. But yeah, Seismitoad is rotating. That pretty much spells death for any of those decks. Seismitoad Giratina is likely, there's no way to make that work anymore. I mean, Giratina decks will still obviously be very good, whether they're combined with, Darkrai or other dragons, things like that. But Seismitoad Giratina, it's gone. Water Toolbox takes a huge hit. It's a lot like Trevenant for me. I don't think there's a way to make Water Toolbox work without Seismitoad. It loses its item lock, and that was one of the things that made it seem so good. It does lose that, and so I'm really not sure the Water Toolbox can work anymore. I would not expect to see it continue to be a thing. Who knows? Maybe it will be. Maybe there'll be another water Pokemon that takes Seismitoad's place. However, it does lose the item lock, which is pretty huge. And so I would not expect for Water Toolbox to be a thing anymore. Another thing that most of the Seismitoad decks ran that is lost in that general concept of the deck is Xerosic. Xerosic is rotating, and so we will no longer have that option for a supporter card to remove the tool or special energy from my opponent's Pokemon, or actually any Pokemon. That's now gone too, and so most of the Seismitoad decks ran Disruption, like Hammers and Xerosic and things like that, and so Xerosic is gone now, and so that's another thing that's rotating out of the standard format. Genesect Bronzong is basically dead. I mean, I guess it had a little while, a few months to kind of be pretty good, but it's basically dead now. And the reason for that is that Metal Link's Bronzong is rotating. And Metal Link's Bronzong was an integral part of the deck. Without Metal Link's Bronzong, I don't think that Genesect works at all. In order to deal that one-hit KO damage, you really have to discard the Metal Energies, and then you relied on Metal Link's Bronzong to get them back out of your discard pile onto your Pokemon to be able to continue to use those attacks. Without Metal Link's Bronzong, I really don't think it works at all. On top of losing Metal Link's Bronzong, it also lost Aegislash, which is a pretty huge hit as well. And so it's not just the Bronzong it's losing, it is also Aegislash, which is a pretty big deal. Some people have been confused and thought that maybe Bronzong wasn't rotating because it's a promo too, but promos are also rotating. I think it's XY 35 and below. I could be wrong on that. I don't have it right in front of me. But I do know that Metal Link's Bronzong is in fact rotating. I'm not sure if there's any other promos that are really relevant that are rotating, but that is one of the promos that is relevant that is in fact rotating. And so Metal Link's Bronzong is gone, and therefore Genesect will probably not be very good anymore. Vespiquen Vileplume lost Battle Compressor, which is a huge deal for the deck. As we all know, Vespiquen has the attack called Be Revenged that deals damage based on the amount of Pokemon you have in your discard pile. So how did you get Pokemon in your discard pile? Well, you used Battle Compressor. And so now that Battle Compressor is gone, it severely, severely hurts the deck. Really, really, really bad. Can it still work? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I doubt it. I guess you could discard Pokemon with things like Sycamore and Ultra Ball, maybe like Misty's Determination, something like that. But without Battle Compressor, it's much more difficult to get those Pokemon in the discard pile, and so I don't think it'll work. I think it's a deck that's pretty much dead without Battle Compressor, especially when you consider the fact that there is a supporter card coming out called Karen, which makes both players shuffle all the Pokemon from the discard pile back into their deck. That that makes Vespiquen even worse. I really don't think Vespiquen Vileplume will continue to be a thing. On top of all of that I already named, AZ is rotating, which may not seem like the biggest deal for a deck like Vespiquen Vileplume, but it actually is. If you had a hard time on your first turn when you're really trying to set up, and you had to go ahead and put the Vileplume down because you're running low on cards, but you didn't get the Float Stone. Maybe you had to discard one, maybe you only had ran one in the deck, you didn't get the Float Stone down, and then they Lysander your Vileplume into the active. You needed AZ in order to be able to fix that situation, to be able to lift up Vileplume and get yourself out of that situation. With AZ gone, you no longer have that option to get rid of, to get your Vileplume out of the active. And of course, once your Vileplume's there, you can't play anything like a Switch or a Float Stone, anything like that. And so, most likely your opponent will just deck you out from that point. And so AZ is actually, it's just another thing that makes Vespiquen Vileplume no longer very good after this rotation does hit. So now we're going to kind of move into some of the decks that either lost basically nothing, or they lost less than other decks. Decks that will continue to probably be pretty good going into the new standard format. And I'm going to start that discussion off with Greninja. Greninja, it did lose a few things. It lost a few things. It just didn't lose as much as the decks I've already talked about. It lost the XY Greninja. That's the Greninja that has the ability Water Shuriken, which you can, from your bench, you can discard a Water energy and it deal 30 damage or put 3 damage counters on any of your opponent's Pokemon. And then you can do that from the bench, unlike the Greninja Break, which has to be in your active in order to use the ability. You can use this Greninja's ability from the bench. And so it does lose that Water Shuriken Greninja. That's not that big of a deal, though, really. I mean, it is a big deal, but it's not at the same time, and that sounds weird. It was definitely one of those things that was really nice, and if you look at it on paper and you're just sort of looking at it theoretically, it seems like a big deal to lose that. But if you really go back through and you watch the games of Greninja at different nationals and different states and things like that, and you really look at what happens in the games, you'll find that Water Shuriken Greninja was not actually used that often. And so even though it does seem like it's a pretty big hit on the deck, it's not, because functionally when you watch games and you watch the deck play out, you don't really see that Water Shuriken ability used all that much. And so the Greninja Break should be fine without it. It should continue to still be a pretty good deck. I don't expect Greninja Break to just die because they lost the Water Shuriken Greninja, and so that's not that big of a deal. Greninja also lost Startling Megaphone, which almost every single Greninja Break deck was running, at least going into Nationals and pretty recently, because of Garbodor. So I'm going to touch a little bit more on Garbodor in a minute, but I have already mentioned that Xerosic got rotated. And so now I'm telling you that Startling Megaphone got rotated. Yes, both got rotated, Startling Megaphone and Xerosic. Which means that we have no trainer card to deal with Garbodor. We have absolutely no trainer card to get rid of the Pokemon tool that's put on Garbodor to activate its ability, which locks you out of all of your abilities. And this is a pretty big deal for Greninja, because Greninja is very reliant on its abilities, and Garbodor really, really, really hurts Greninja Break. And so does that mean that there is no way to get rid of Pokemon tools? It does not. We do have a way to deal with Pokemon tools, but it's not a trainer, and it's not real pretty. But we're going to cover it in a little bit. Sacred Ash. We lost Sacred Ash in Greninja Break, which, I mean, it hurts the deck, but it's not that big of a deal. Sacred Ash is great in the deck because it allows you to get 5 of your Pokemon from the discard pile and put them back into your deck. Likely it will be replaced with Super Rod, which only does 3 instead of 5, but allows you to also maybe put some energy back into your deck if you're forced to use it early on. Maybe people will find space for 2 Super Rods. I'm not sure. They might run the supporter I spoke of a little bit earlier, Karen, which forces both players to put all of their Pokemon from their discard pile back in their decks. Greninja Break might run that supporter. I don't know. It does take up your supporter for the turn, which is not very good. It also can help your opponent out by putting their Pokemon back into their deck as well. So I'm not sure if Greninja will run Super Rod or Karen. We will have to see, but it is losing Sacred Ash. The next deck I want to cover is the Zygarde Carbink Break deck, which kind of made a pretty big splash at US Nationals. There were a few people that did pretty good with it. It did lose a few things, to be honest. It lost a decent bit, But with this one, it's less about the quantity of stuff that it lost and really about more how much of an impact does it have on the deck. And so Zygarde Carbink Break lost Fighting Stadium. It lost Corona, which is a pretty big hit, to be honest. Corona was one of the best supporters in fighting decks, and it did rotate. And so Corona not being in the format, it sucks. It really does for fighting decks. It's not good. But again, it does rotate. Focus Sash got rotated. Lucario EX got rotated, and so does Hawlucha. And so those are the things that rotated out of the fighting things. Not that many of the Zygarde Carbink Break decks that I saw were running Hawlucha. I think Hawlucha is a pretty good card. I mean, 1 energy, 60 damage. You know, you can put a strong energy on there. It's a pretty good card, I thought. But I didn't see that many Zygarde Carbink Breaks running it. However, most of them were running Lucario EX or Lucario EX, which I always say Lucario EX, but I'm actually pretty sure it is Lucario, but I'm not really sure. Lucario EX, whatever. People were running this in Zygarde, with the main reason for it being that it's not Grass Week, because everything else is Grass Week. Zygarde and Carbink are both Grass Week, and so they used Lucario as a Pokemon that was Psychic Week instead of being Grass Week. And so that's also another hit to the deck. I still think Zygarde Carbink Break works even without all these things. I think people just have to figure out a new way to make the deck. You know, how it's going to look now. But I think it still works. Moving on, Darkrai Giratina lost almost nothing. Darkrai Giratina was super hyped going into the U.S. Nationals, and it's still going to be really, really good because it doesn't really lose much of anything. It lost maybe AZ. Most of the list ran AZ. Most of them ran Zerosic. So it loses those 2 cards, I guess, but not that big of a deal, to be honest. It's still going to be a very, very, very good deck. And so Darkrai Giratina is a pretty safe bet going into the rotation because it didn't lose much and it was already good before the rotation. Mega Rayquaza, obviously the metal version lost the Metal Link's Bronzong, so the metal version doesn't exist anymore. No more metal Mega Rayquaza, but the regular version that ran things like Jolteon or Raichu is still very good. It lost almost nothing. And so the non-metal version of Mega Rayquaza will continue to be very good. And so I expect to see that to have a force in the new meta when the rotation does hit. Mega Rayquaza will likely be very good. And so we will see how that kind of shakes out. Another kind of honorable mention I'm going to mention here, just because I think it's worth talking about, is Yveltal. And so Yveltal kind of died out toward the end of the season. No one was really running it. It didn't win anything. It didn't really even top cut. I think it got second at one of the European Nationals, maybe the UK Nationals. I can't really remember, but I think that's right. And so it's not like it's terrible. I mean, it had a share of the metagame, but it wasn't nearly as good as it once was in the metagame. It sort of had been phased out. The game had sort of moved on from Yveltal. And so, however, I think it's important to point out that Yveltal lost basically nothing. And it was strong all season. Yveltal is a card that's been around for a long time. It's always been good. My advice to players that are looking at this new format is to not count Yveltal out, because I think counting Yveltal out is never a good idea. It lost basically nothing. Everything got reprinted. Yveltal EX got the new 10s that came out with the shiny version, so it will be legal for a very long time. The Yveltal with Oblivion Wing got reprinted in Generations. It will be legal for a very long time. Most of the important cards, they're going to be around for a while. I wouldn't count Yveltal out. It lost basically nothing. So one other card, I'm going to move into talking about just individual cards now that in general were lost. And so one of the only Pokemon really of mention that I really want to throw in here that got rotated is Aromatisse, which is a Pokemon that was included in the fairy decks that were going around that allowed them to freely swap their energy around. And Aromatisse is getting rotated, so that does hit fairy decks, which were already not very good. And now they lose that as well, and so they went from not very good to not good at all, probably. Who knows? Maybe we'll see something fairy sometime soon, but it's not been good so far, and I think the loss of Aromatisse is a pretty big one. So we also lost Muscle Band. which was included in a lot of decks. We lost Blacksmith, which fire decks similar to fairy decks have not been good for a long time. And now they will continue to not be very good because Blacksmith is getting rotated. And so that's a pretty huge hit for fire decks. The only fire deck that really made any sort of splash was the Entei Charizard deck that was very reliant on Blacksmith. That deck basically dies with Blacksmith rotating. So we will see what fire manages to pull off without Blacksmith. Headringer is rotating, which I personally am very happy about. I hate Headringer as a card. A lot of people love it. They like disrupting their opponents. I get it. People were running Headringer and Trevenant toward the end of the season here, but I don't like Headringer. I'm glad to see it go, but it is rotated. One kind of grouping of cards, I'm just going to kind of group all together because they're all rotating and they're all somewhat similar, is Super Scoop Up, AZ, and Cassius. They are all rotating. And so Super Scoop Up, of course, is the item card which you play, flip a coin. If heads, you pick up one of your Pokemon in play and put that card and all of the cards attached to it back into your hand. It is rotating. It has been legal for a very long time, but it is now rotating. And so that's a pretty big deal. AZ is getting rotated, which was basically a supporter version of Super Scoop Up that did not have the coin flip, but also made you discard all the cards attached to the Pokemon you picked back up and put in your hand. So just a little bit different, but AZ is also rotating. AZ saw a lot of play in a lot of decks, though, so that's pretty impactful on the meta. Cassius is also rotating. Cassius was not really played much at all. It's kind of like an AZ, except you shuffle a Pokemon and everything attached to it back into your deck. You don't pick it up and put it back into your hand, and you don't discard the cards attached to it. You put the Pokemon and everything attached to it back in your deck, shuffle your deck, etc. But Cassius never really saw play. However, if Super Scoop Up and AZ were rotating and Cassius was still in the format, Cassius would see a lot. It would see a lot of play. However, it does rotate with them, and so all three of those are gone. Target Whistle is rotating, which Target Whistle has been put in a lot of different decks. It was put in Nightmarch. It was put in Genesect Bronzong, I think, ran like one of those. I know that the Quad Zoroark deck that was popular for a little while ran like 2 or 3 Target Whistles. And the point of the Target Whistle was, in a deck that you could one-shot a Shaman, and then you could Target Whistle it, and then one-shot it again, and then Target Whistle it, and one-shot it again. You kill 3 Shaman, you win the game. But now Target Whistle is rotating. It will no longer be in the standard format. Hard Charm is rotating, which is not really much to mention. It was run in some Greninja decks. It was run in a few different things. Not a big deal. Not a huge loss. Xerosic and Starling Megaphone, like I've already mentioned, are rotating. And the big deal about this is now that we have no way of dealing with a Pokemon tool, there's 2 things this can kind of cause. Number 1 is that big basic EXs with fighting Fury Belts are going to be really difficult to deal with now because we don't have any way of getting rid of their fighting Fury Belt. And so, a 220 HP big old EX with a fighting Fury Belt is going to be really hard to deal with. The other thing is Garbodor, like I already mentioned. Like I already kind of mentioned, Garbodor is a Pokemon that when it has a tool card attached to it, shuts off all the abilities of all Pokemon in play. Everything, all abilities are gone. And so previously, the way you dealt with Garbodor was with Xerosic or with Startling Megaphone. Both are rotating. However, I mentioned a little bit earlier that there is still a way to get rid of tools. It's just not a trainer card, and it's not quite as easy and as efficient to use as Xerosic and Startling Megaphone were in most decks. But the only card I know of now that can remove tools, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the only thing I know of now, is actually the Minccino that came out in Fates Collide. And so Minccino has an attack. It is it's a colorless Pokemon. It has an attack for 1 colorless energy that allows you to remove the tool from any of your opponent's Pokemon. And so it's not the Pokemon you're removing the tool from does not have to be the active. You use the attack. You can remove any tool from any of their Pokemon that are currently in play. And so that, I think, is going to be the only way to get rid of a tool. And so, it's not the best way to do it. It's probably not, I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. But I think that Minccino is actually the only way to get rid of tools in the standard format. As far as we know right now, not seeing any reprints or anything like that, I think Minccino is all we have. So Let's talk a little bit about decks that may be good. Obviously, we have things like Darkrai Giratina that don't lose much, Mega Rayquaza that didn't lose much. A lot of people are thinking that Mega Rayquaza is going to be the best deck in format come rotation. I wouldn't be so quick to jump on that train, though, because Mega Rayquaza is pretty easily countered. For one thing, Raichu counters it really easily. It hits for weakness. And it can take advantage of Skyfield, the stadium that Mega Rayquaza runs anyway. And so Raichu's pretty efficient at countering Mega Rayquaza. But even without running something like Raichu, which is, sort of like putting Raichu in a random deck, can feel a little bit weird. You have other options too. You have Parallel City. If you run Parallel City, you just reduce their bench to 3. That limits Rayquaza's damage immensely. But my favorite counter to Mega Rayquaza is Zoroark, which can be put in any deck. I mean, Zoroark is a great card anyway. It has a great attack. It has the ability to pretty much give anything that you're playing free retreat because it has the stand-in ability, which is a lot like Keldeo's ability, where it can it can become your active Pokemon during your turn. And then if you have a Float Stone on it, you can then retreat into one of your other Pokemon to give basically all your Pokemon free retreat. So Zoroark is already a great card, and Zoroark counters the crap in a Mega Rayquaza because Mega Rayquaza deals 30 damage times the number of benched Pokemon that the Mega Rayquaza player has benched. Zoroark deals 10 damage plus 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And so, however many benched Pokemon the Rayquaza player has, Mega Rayquaza deals 30 times that number. Zoroark deals 30 times that number plus 10. And so Zoroark will always be dealing 10 more damage than Mega Rayquaza. And it's a non-EX. You can throw it in anything. It's always useful. I'm very hesitant to jump on the Mega Rayquaza is going to be the best deck in format train. Zygarde Carbonic Break will likely be very good. It just needs to figure out a Pokemon to run that does not have grass weakness. Right now, it's not very obvious if there will be any good grass decks, so maybe it won't be a problem. But I do think you need to have better coverage than all of your Pokemon being weak to grass. And so it needs to figure out a Pokemon that's not weak to grass. Maybe Medicham. Who knows? But it needs to figure out something. Speaking of grass decks, Mega Sceptile could be pretty good. People are hyping it up right now as a possible best deck in format. Who knows? Could be. That's probably going to depend a lot on the Volcanions that are coming out in Steam Siege. If the Volcanions turn out to be really, really good and people do play them, Mega Sceptile will probably continue to not be very good as it is weak to fire. But without that, in general, the decks that are rotating means that the format is going to slow down immensely. And so that benefits Mega Sceptile a lot. Mega Sceptile was always one of the decks that was very, 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 very good. It was just a little too slow for the format, though. And so with the format slowing down, maybe Mega Sceptile will be really good. Who knows? Mega Mewtwo is another deck that might be really good going into the new format. Mega Mewtwo is a deck that is inherently very, very powerful. The main reason why it was not good in the previous format was Nightmarch. Mega Mewtwo is obviously a psychic Pokemon. It has psychic weakness. Pumpkaboo and Mew in Nightmarch decks both hit for weakness on Mega Mewtwo. It made Mewtwo terrible. And so that's pretty much the reason why you never really saw anything out of Mewtwo. And so who knows? Maybe Mega Mewtwo will be really good now without Nightmarch in the format. A lot of people think so. I personally think it probably will be pretty good too. I think Mega Mewtwo will probably see a good bit of play. Mega Alakazam is sort of in the same boat. Mega Alakazam is another psychic Pokemon that suffered from psychic weakness that is now out of the format for the most part. And so Mega Alakazam could be pretty good. However, the option of running it with Crobat is obviously gone now since Crobat rotates. And it also lost the same things that Trevenant lost, i.e. Dimension Valley and Mystery Energy. So it lost those two things, which makes it a little more awkward to attack with Mega Alakazam without the Dimension Valley. And the Mystery Energy was always useful to get the retreat on the Alakazams. And most of the list ran Wobbuffet to give that free retreat. And so, things like that. So Mega Alakazam, it could be okay. I don't really think it will be that good, to be honest. I think it'll be a fun deck to play, but I don't know if it's really going to have a huge share of the meta. But who knows? We will see, I guess. Greninja is the last deck I want to talk about. Greninja really does have a good shot at being best deck in the format. It's very, very, very good deck. It loses almost nothing. It was already very strong. It will likely be a very good deck. The only thing holding it down right now is Garbodor. Like I talked about, Garbodor without having Xerosic and Starling Megaphone is going to be an issue. But it's sort of weird the way that kind of stuff works, right? Because you have Garbodor existing, and so therefore people don't play Greninja Break because they're scared of Garbodor. But then people stop playing Greninja Break, and so people stop teching Garbodor into their decks, and because it's not very good in other matchups, you really just want it for the Greninja matchup. And so now that people stopped teching Garbodor, people start playing Greninja again. And so it's this sort of weird back and forth thing that goes on with Greninja and Garbodor. We'll see how it all turns out. I do think that Minccino can work in Greninja as a way to get rid of the tool on Garbodor. I think that that's one of the decks that can maybe run it. Mega Alakazam is another one of the decks that's really weak to Garbodor. But I think Minccino is considerably more awkward in Mega Alakazam than in Greninja. I think Minccino can maybe work there. But we will see. I think Greninja is going to be a very good deck. Of course, there's always the cards that are coming out in Steam Siege, which need to be thought about as far as the new rotation and the new meta goes. Ninja Boy's coming out, which is a card that will likely see a lot of play. The two supporters that are coming out are probably going to see a lot of play are Ninja Boy and Pokemon Ranger. So Ninja Boy reads, search your deck for a basic Pokemon and switch it with one of your basic Pokemon in play. Any cards attached to that Pokemon, damage counters, special conditions, and effects on it are now on the new Pokemon. Shuffle the first basic Pokemon into your deck. And so it allows you basically just to swap in your basic Pokemon that's currently in play with a different one from your deck. Shuffle the other one back into your deck. And so it's probably going to see a good bit of play. It's like the only real way. It's the only effect that is like AZ-ish that will be in the format. And so I think that Ninja Boy will see a lot of play. You can do things like play Hoopa and play Shaymins and then Ninja Boy them back into your deck to get your other Pokemon out. It allows you to go ahead and like be putting energy onto Shaymins and tools and things. Which normally you're like, I don't want to max elixir onto a Shaymin. That's a wasted energy or whatever. Now you do that, you just Ninja Boy to a Pokemon you actually want to use later. Not a big deal. So I think Ninja Boy will be seeing a lot of play. And then Pokemon Ranger is the other supporter coming out in Steam Siege. In Pokemon Ranger is probably going to see a lot of play as well. It reads both players' Pokemon are no longer affected by effects from attacks. So any effect from an attack, no longer affected. And so think of things like Jolteon EX. When it attacks with its second attack, it becomes immune to basic Pokemon. Well, it comes back to your turn. You play Pokemon Ranger. You can still hit Jolteon. It's no longer immune. Same idea for Regice. You can just play Pokemon Ranger. Then you can just keep on hitting Regice with your Pokemon EX. No big deal. So Pokemon Ranger will probably see a lot of play, especially if Jolteon becomes pretty big. Expect to see a lot of Pokemon Rangers in the format. But there's a lot of cards that are coming out that look pretty good that might have effects on the meta that might be pretty good decks. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Xerneas Break looks pretty good. Yveltal Break looks pretty good. Maybe that's the thing that will bring Yveltal Zoroark kind of back into the format. I mentioned Yveltal maybe still being good to not count it out. Who knows? Yveltal Break might be the thing that brings it back. Volcanion, I mentioned it when I mentioned Mega Sceptile. There is a non-EX and an EX version of Volcanion coming out that might be pretty good. If they are, then, I'm sure we'll see them played. Who knows? New Gardevoir EX is coming out, which is pretty cool. I don't really know how good it looks. There's a new Gardevoir and a new Mega Gardevoir that are coming out. I'm questionable about how good they'll be. But we'll see. They look fun. You should check out all the cards in the Steam Siege, the new expansion that will be coming out next month, if you haven't yet. So some of those cards may make a pretty big impact on the meta. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But thanks for watching the video, guys. I know this one was pretty long, but this is my basic rundown of the entire rotation. It's the only video I'm going to do on the rotation that's specifically about the rotation. So this was everything I had to say about the rotation, pretty much. And so if you like this kind of content, if you like the video, let me know. If you can think of anything that I didn't mention in this that should have been mentioned when it comes to the rotation, put it in the comments. Let people know so that if they watch this video, they can scroll down and go, hey, this rotated and he didn't mention it. That's very useful. And so, like I said, I'm going to be uploading some gameplay pretty soon. I know everyone's been going, hey, I want to see gameplay, I want to see gameplay. I'm going to do gameplay. It's coming up. Like I said, there's just been a lot to talk about, and so I've been kind of focusing on these kind of videos, but gameplay is coming up next. And so I appreciate you guys watching the video. Let me know what you thought of it. Let me know what you guys think of the rotation that's coming up. If you're excited for it, if you're dreading it, if you hate rotations because you spent money on cards, now they can't be played in the standard format. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys next time.